Morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us on this second webinar following the publication of the new NCAA college rankings a few weeks ago. Thank you also to everyone that has taken the time and effort to submit questions in advance of today's session. My name is Piers Parnell. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Clipped. And it goes without saying, but obviously after some of the early season issues with the appointment of Spike Mark, in mid-October, we were approached and asked by the NCAA to assume responsibility for the data platform that publishes all school scores, rankings, and results for the NCAA, the NAIA, and the NJCAA. Hopefully, you are all here to discuss that new college ranking system that was commissioned by the NCAA to include Professor Broadie's new methodologies. And our role here today really is to make sure that we provide you with access to Professor Broadie and the NCAA in order to facilitate the understanding and transparency that's required with this new ranking. Hopefully you will already have seen that we've done quite a lot to communicate how the system works. Professor Broadie has taken a lot of time and effort to work with us to publish extensive FAQs, which have been shared in emails by various governing bodies, the GCAA, WGCA, and the NCAA, as well as the NAIA and NJCAA. And they also appear on the Spike Mark powered by Clipped website. Today really is very much about answering your questions. We took on board a lot of feedback from the first webinar, and today we'll see Mark Broadie answering specific questions that have been put forward by coaches. Most of these questions have been submitted in advance, and in addition, through the course of the webinar, particularly towards the end, we'll be asking some coaches to ask questions in person. We've scheduled this for this webinar for 90 minutes. I think there were 220 coaches registered at last count, so we'll do our very best to keep to time. But equally, we recognize how important this is to everyone involved and to the entire college community. So thank you again for your interest and your input. And, before handing over to Dan Davies, who's our head of comms here at Clipped, and he'll run through sort of the house rules for the webinar. And then we'll hand over to John Baldwin and the NCAA. I just wanted to announce that we're very pleased from Clipp's point of view to say that our team has been added to by the addition of Mark Zell, familiar to many, if not all of you, and certainly from our point of view, a major priority as we look to do the very best job that we can in serving you as a community. So we're delighted, to say the least, that Marcus has come and joined the team and is already providing a lot of clarity and understanding to us and to the overall proposition that we're looking to put forward and build for you all. Marcus, I don't know if you'd like to say a few words, but thank you from me, and over to you.
For sure. Thanks, Piers. And I know we've only got 90 minutes, so I'll try to keep my portion, shorter than 60. But first, I do want to say I'm lucky and blessed to still be in this position, to be involved. So thank you to the Clip team, but also, honestly, thank you to those on the call and other coaches that can't make it, so on and so forth. I know this time has been challenging for you all and for me as well, but you guys don't know how much it has meant to me, for those of you that have even reached out just to say, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? I will also say that once I kind of found out that Clip was involved in this process moving forward, I told many of you that whether that involves me or not, they're going to do it the right way, just because I knew what they were about. And now that I've been involved for a week, a month, whatever it is, but however our conversation started, I think they've only proved that they're good people. They do it the right way. And now I think we really got a good team together to really put forth the effort needed to provide you all with really good stuff moving forward. So all that to say, I'm excited. My passion's still the same. The mission's still the same. So I'm ready to get to work. So With that, I'll go ahead and pass it to John.
Great. Thanks, Marcus. And I think it goes without saying that everybody on today's call is excited to see you on as well, and know what you bring to the table, and your expertise and commitment to college golf. So thrilled that you're a part of it. And I know that those within our membership certainly would echo that as well. So from the national office perspective, great to see you. Great to have you on today, and look forward to continue to work with you as well. So as we get into today, I know there may be some attendees who were on from last week who are also on today. Many of you may not have been on last week. Some of what I'm going to say over the next couple of minutes is similar to what I said last week, but I want to make sure that all of our attendees, both last week and this week, are able to hear a consistent message from our side of things. For those that I haven't met, I'm John Baldwin, on behalf of our colleagues here at the NCAA, speaking today. And before turning it over to Dan and ultimately to Professor Broadie, I did want to take a moment again to acknowledge and apologize for the start to the fall season, which can only be described as disruptive, among other items. When the decision was made to move to a new scoring and ranking platform, there was certainly an understanding that there would be some bumps along the way, some things that would need to be worked through during that transition. As has been well documented, those challenges obviously proved to be much greater than anticipated at the outset and throughout much of the fall semester. For that, on behalf of us at the NCAA, again, we can only apologize to you all and your student athletes for that part of the fall season and what you all experienced in terms of disruption. We're certainly thankful to the CLIP team for jumping in. They've dedicated a lot of resources to build a platform to warehouse and publish the tournament results and the rankings. We're confident, more so now than ever, that the experience during the spring season will be significantly improved and in line with what each of you all and your student athletes deserve, not to mention everyone else in the college golf community. No doubt there's been significant progress made over the course of the fall. Piers noted that at the outset. On last week's call and over the course of the last week, we have also received some data corrections that have been submitted since those rankings were originally released. In fact, the CLIP team has taken in approximately 100 or so data corrections that followed on from that verification period. Everything from A and B team designations to withdrawals to other necessary corrections. Professor Broadie is making some necessary fixes to the processing code. The methodology is the methodology. That's not going to change. But with those dating and coding fixes, there will be a republishing of the rankings that will come in the near future with 100% accurate data. We'll be working with the appropriate groups, the other governing bodies, and the associations to confirm the timing of this republishing of the rankings in a timing pattern that makes sense for all involved. Additionally, we've received some feedback in recent weeks regarding new and better ways that information can potentially be displayed on the website. In short, we want to help everyone to understand and feel comfortable with the new ranking system. We're listening to the feedback that we're receiving and exploring possible new ways to display the information around points awarded on the website. This is going to continue to be an important item for all of us collectively to address as we move forward. We certainly look forward to receiving more information and feedback from you all, not only through today's call, but during the upcoming convention in Las Vegas and through other means as well. Two other items that I did want to hit on quickly before turning it over to Dan, and I hit on both of these last week. So again, apologize for those of you that are hearing this again. We have received several questions this fall about the role of our national and regional advisory committees. Again, just want to be clear, nothing has changed with regard to our national committees. And in divisions 2 and 3, where we have regional advisory committees, nothing has changed with those processes and those roles. Those committees will continue to evaluate just as they have in prior years using the established selection criteria. Divisions 2 and 3 will continue to have regional rankings that are discussed and recommended by the regional advisory committees. And then the national committees will publish those and ultimately select the regional and national fields just as they have in prior years. Again, that process hasn't changed. Secondly, we've heard the desire from Division 2 about having a national ranking published and shown on the website. Again, that's something that can and will be done here in the near future. Originally, because the ranking and selection processes for Division 2 are regional in nature only with no national piece or component to that, the decision was made initially to show those in a manner that's consistent with how those rankings and selections occur. Again, we've heard and it's been clear that through the feedback that there's a desire for that national ranking. So that is something that you all will see in the near future, and it'll be made available. So with that, I will turn it over to Dan for some additional information on today's webinar. And again, thanks to Professor Broadie, to everyone at Clipped, and certainly for each of you all who are on with us today, for your time, for your questions, and for your collaboration as we continue to move forward positively. Dan?
Thanks very much, John. Hi, my name is Dan Davies, and I'm the head of comms for Clipped. Following feedback from coaches after the first webinar, we will be structuring today's meeting a little bit differently. I will be putting specific questions submitted in advance to Mark Broadie. In the interest of time and efficiency, we've grouped these into 4 groups. They are sort of points, both weighting and allocation. The second group is match play. The third group concerns cross-divisional play. Is it better to play up or play down a division? And then the fourth group is questions on all other topics. During the first 3 sections, we encourage you to ask questions about the specific topic we are discussing. Marcus L. will help to moderate these questions, which we'll endeavour to put to Professor Broadie. You can submit questions by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and please try and keep these in and around the topic we're discussing. It will really help us to ensure your questions get asked. With 200 plus people on the webinar, it sadly won't be possible to ask every question, but we will do our best to ensure that we cover the most important ones. And again, you can help us by giving a thumbs up to questions that you feel need to be prioritized. Once we've gone through these 4 sections, we'll move to an open Q&A session. Again, please submit your questions by clicking the Q&A at the bottom. At Clipped, we are committed to facilitating understanding of Professor Broadie's new NCAA golf ranking system. The reality is we'll not be able to cover everything today, but you can submit outstanding questions you have to support@clip.io, and we will provide answers from Mark Broadie. And after this webinar, we will begin work on adding to the list of FAQs and the explanation of the ranking system that already appears on the website. And we encourage people who maybe haven't seen that to dive into that. Thank you again for your time. And we're going to start today's webinar with the first question from Lisa Strom, who is head coach of the Ohio State women's team.
I'll unmute it. There we go. Good morning, everybody. Great to see a lot of familiar faces. Marcus, awesome to have you back aboard in college golf. That's where you belong. So we're super, super excited to see that. I guess just kicking it right off to you, Mark, can you explain how the head-to-head points work and the influence a head-to-head match has on the team or players' points? And then, how are they weighted? Is it 1/3 of the value since it's only 1 round?
Thanks so much, Lisa. I appreciate the question. I think that's been one of the ones that we've had a lot of questions about. So I think it's a good place to start. So if there's head-to-head match play, unlike stroke play, we'll talk about that. With match play only, there's a total points that are fixed in advance. And the total points that will be distributed are the sum of the average points of the players or teams in that match. So we have this difference between stroke play and match play. In match play, the total points is fixed, and the points are allocated in such a way that with a win, that player or team's average points will always increase. And with a loss, that player or team's average points will always decrease. And with the tie, if ties are allowed, the higher ranked players' average points will decrease and the lower ranked players' average points will increase. And the reason for that is if you win a match, you've done the best that you can do. So the ranking impact should be, you should stay the same or move up. With a loss, that's the worst you can do. Your ranking should stay the same or move down. With a tie, it's a little bit more nuanced because you have a higher ranked team versus a lower ranked team. And in the case of a tie, it's the performance is not as good for the higher ranked team that you would expect to do, you know, a tie or win, and for the lower ranked team. So after a tie, you would expect those two teams or players to have their ranks move closer together. So the higher ranked team move down a little bit, the lower ranked team move up a little bit. But the biggest point of confusion, I think, is that match play carries a 1/3 weight compared to 3-round tournaments. And I'll get to that in a second. So the way the points are allocated in match play, with a win against a weaker opponent, your average points will increase only slightly. And that's because if you beat a lower ranked player, you're not getting much information. You expect the higher ranked player to win against a lower ranked player, so not much should happen in their ranks. So a win, you always have to stay the same or get better. But if it's a low ranked player and it's the expected outcome, not much is going to change in the ranking. Against a stronger opponent, if there's an upset, then you've got a lot of new information that the lower ranked team is probably better and deserves to move up, and the higher ranked team is probably worse and they deserve to move down. And so you get bigger rank changes in that case. But let me go to the weighting. So are they weighted 1/3 since it's only one round? And the answer is yes. That's exactly right. So imagine a team earns 100 points in a 3-round stroke play event, and they play better and earn 150 points in a 1-round match. And the most visible part of this is 150 is so much bigger than 100. How can that be? But the way to think about it is the 100 gets a weight of 1 because a 3-round event counts as like one event, whereas a 1-round match counts as 1/3 of a full event. So the 150 points from the match is divided by 3 to give an effective 50-point change in the player or team's average points. So in this case, the 3-round stroke play event versus the 1-round match play, the 3-round event will have a bigger impact on a team's rank than the 1-round match play. And so whenever you see a 1-round point allocation, in your head, you've got to divide it by 3 to see how much is it going to affect the rankings. And the answer is it's divided by 3, so it doesn't affect the rankings nearly as much as a 3-round event. And so one of the things Dan mentioned is that we're looking at ways to add this information to the website so it'll be clearer that the 150 points doesn't have nearly the impact because it's 1 round that the 100 points does in the stroke play. Does that answer your question, Lisa?
Yeah, I think that's super helpful. Can you touch on how or when the points are allocated to the teams, how far into the season that points then become assigned to a team? And then, for example, maybe one of our first tournaments of the year is in New Mexico. Those teams then have those points. Then we know how many points are available at that tournament. And does that retroactively go into each of the events you've already played, or is that then allocated based on your performance in that event and it's new points coming into the next event you play?
So after, say, the first week or 2 of the season, it's not possible if you only use that season's data to come up with a ranking. So it's actually not possible in match play to allocate points unless you make some assumptions, which we're not going to make. So the idea is in the fall, the match play points are allocated based on all of your stroke play events, so that we have a very good idea of the strength and the rank of the teams involved. Then the match play points are allocated and awarded. And this will come up again, but the idea that we've heard from coaches is that as the season progresses, you get better information about which teams were stronger and which teams were weaker, and those will be retroactively applied. So basically, the match play points will use all of the information up until that point, as opposed to 1 week we do something, we fix it, the next week we do something else and fix it. It's actually more accurate to use all of the information, decide what is a fair number of total points to allocate, and then allocate that at the end. So it's not a sequential week by week, the points are reallocated. So we're trying to use the best information about how strong teams are, how many points they bring to a match, and then divvy them up that way.
Okay. And then are you going to touch on the stroke play part of this as well?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So the short answer is 1 round stroke play has a weight of 1/3 because it's 1 round, so a dual match. However, every stroke play event, there are not fixed points. In a stroke play event, because there's a stroke differential, you don't want to allocate a fixed number of points. So that's the main difference between stroke play and match play, is that in stroke play, there's not a fixed total number of points. This only applies to match play, and only because there's no margin of victory that's included. You only get a win, loss, or tie. Whereas as soon as you say, even if it's a dual stroke play match, now you have a stroke differential that you can use, so the total points is not fixed.
Okay, Elisa, is there anything else you'd like
Well,
to
I guess just to reiterate to the stroke play part of that.
Yep.
For example, when do XYZ University, when do they have their points assigned to them? Like how far into that fall season, did you all of a sudden, okay, your average points is around 40 and you're going to take that back to that first tournament you played in? And then I think there's some confusion around that.
Yeah, so the original plan, and this is partly part of the confusion, was the original plan was to fix the points for that first half of the fall, fix them, and then go week to week. The new plan and what we're doing based on feedback is there will be retroactive points changes, so that the points awarded will be using all of the data simultaneously up until the current point in the season. Even in the spring, the points in the fall could change, but don't everybody freak out. They're not going to change very much. There will be tiny changes as additional information is included. So the idea is to come up with the most accurate ranking, to use all the information together. The downside is that the points will move a little bit in the fall as you go through the spring, but they won't move very much. So that's sort of the trade-off. If you fix the points, everybody can look and say, okay, that's never going to change, but it's more accurate to use all of the data up until whatever point in the season you're at. And so that's the plan going forward. But again, the amount that the points change will be quite small.
So as a team maybe improves from where they were in the fall, that could kind of impact the strength of field for that specific tournament maybe they played in. But is it fair to say, like, well,
yes,
if a tournament win happened against a team that wasn't ranked very well at the beginning and that team got better, then you're going to start to be like, oh, I get more credit because they are getting better. It actually was a better win than it shows. Correct.
That's exactly right. Okay. And the reason it's not going to make a big change in the points is, if you got a 15-team field, they're not all getting better. Some are getting a little bit better, some are getting a little bit worse. If net they're a little bit better, and you won that event, you'll get a little bit more credit for that. But you're not going to get a ton more credit, because it's kind of unlikely that, those 14 teams would have all gotten better to whatever. So there will be minor adjustments, but exactly for the reason that you said, if you learn later on that your win was against some stronger teams, you'll get a little bit more credit for that.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much, Coach. We're going to have to move on now because we've got a lot of questions to get through. But thank you so much for your questions.
Thanks, Lisa.
This is a question, Professor Broadie, from Elisa Waite of CSU Long Beach, which again sort of speaks to points. Why are we ranked here? And I know you have an example worked up for this.
Great, thanks. And I'm not quite sure if I'm pronouncing it right with Alyssa or Elisa, but I'll try Alyssa. So California State University Long Beach is ranked 68th. And the question is, why are we ranked here? And this is a chart that I went through in quite a bit of detail in the last webinar. But this is showing all of CSU Long Beach's head-to-head matches against Strokeplay against every other team. So if you're in a 15-team event, then CSU is going to have 14 head-to-head matches summarized by these dots. And so dots that are the same color are the same event. So there's some green dots in one tournament and some blue dots in another, some red dots in another tournament. And the dots indicate how much CSU beat the other team or lost to the other team measured in strokes. So going left to right, you have average points. Stronger teams are on the right, weaker teams on the left. If you want to look at the ranks, the number one ranked team would be over here, 150 would be over there. So this is a way to show a lot of information about how CSU Long Beach performed. And the blue dashed line is kind of a best fit regression line through all of this data. So if a team is ranked accurately, you would expect many more of these dots to be in the two green regions. This lower left green region is lower ranked teams that CSU beats. The green region upper right is higher ranked teams that CSU lost to. And in most cases, there will be many more dots in the green regions, which are the expected outcomes, and many fewer dots in the red regions, which are the upsets. And usually it's not this clean, but in this case, all of these dots are in the green region except for one upset, which is this red dot, which you might see in the upper left where my cursor is. So this CSU team, I would argue, is correctly ranked, and a simple version of this, if you're not looking at all the stroke differentials, is against lower ranked teams, CSU was 47, 1, and 0. 47 wins, 1 loss, which is that red dot, and no ties. So there are 47 dots in the lower left. If you look in the upper right, there are no wins and 8 losses. So there's 8 dots here and 1 tie, which is either that blue dot or somewhere you can't quite see. So ranked 68, CSU beats virtually every lower ranked team and loses to every higher ranked team. So the algorithm takes into account margin of victory and stroke differentials, but a simple version of this is just to look at the win, loss, and tie record. And the team, I think, is pretty fairly ranked if they beat up on the lower ranked teams and lose to the higher ranked teams. And here it's very clear cut. If they're ranked at 68th, these are their win, loss, and tie records. If you think they should be ranked 50th, these win, loss, and tie records just won't make nearly as much sense. So what I think tends to happen is teams will understandably look at, oh, well, we won this event and this event by this many strokes. Well, yes, if those were lower ranked teams, you're kind of expected to win those matches, and not focusing as much on the higher ranked teams that you're losing to. And a ranking system needs to take into account not only what CSU Long Beach does, but all of the head-to-heads, not some of them. And then how does this performance compare to teams ranked above and teams ranked below, which is a lot harder to digest all of that information. But I hope this chart, Alyssa, helps to convince you that a rank of 68 is very well deserved, and that a rank of 75 would be not deserved, and a rank of 50 would also be not deserved.
Okay, thanks, Mark. A couple of questions here from Ryan Potter of Wake Forest. We need to know how the margin of victory is determined and how strength of field comes into play. LSU's win at Medina and UCLA's win at Windy City were elite performances based on the field they played and the margin of victory. And Ryan would like to see an analysis of these events, please, Mark.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. A lot of good questions. So the four tournaments that you're asking about, Medina, Blessings, the Carmel Cup, and Windy City, are these 4 tournaments on the right. But I want to put this into a little bit of a larger context by showing weaker events, as these are very strong events. So on the horizontal axis here, you basically have how strong is the event, with weaker events on the left, this Terrier Intercollegiate. This Pat Lesser Harbottle Invitational is a median strength of field kind of event. The Dale McNamara is the 75th percentile, so it's one of the top quartile stronger events. And then these 4 events that you're asking about are 4 of the 9 strongest events. So they're way to the right. But before we get to those and zoom in on those, if you take a look at these events, you'll see a pretty clear pattern, which is the winner of a weak event gets fewer points than the winner of a stronger event, gets fewer points than the winner of a stronger event. So the winner here, you can think of this as a leaderboard. The winner of the Terrier Intercollegiate got 11 points. The winner over here of the Pat Lesser Harbottle got 19 points, almost double. And the winner of the Dale McNamara got 38 points, again, almost double. So almost double the points for the winners as you go into stronger events. These 4 events on the right have more than double the points again. And the average win points for these 4 events is about 119. But you can see there's a clear pattern that the winners get more points, the losers get less points, the middle of the pack finishers, the weaker events, they also go in this expected order. So now let me focus on these 4 events that you're asking about. And these 4 events are a little bit outside the norm of what you would expect, which is why the question came. So these 4 events are all strong. They're 4 of the top 9 strongest events, and the most points were awarded at the Blessings. And then second after that was the winner of the Carmel Cup, and then I guess the Medina and the Windy City. So a lot of the questions has to do with, well, look at that Blessings win. Look at how many points were awarded. And the reason that the winner of the Blessings has a much bigger point award is because of the huge margin of victory. This was a 1.75 stroke per player per round victory, where most of the others you can see average about 0.7 of a stroke. The difference between first and second here, here, and here. So this is double or triple the margin of victory, and the stroke differential matters. So this gets a lot of points because this team sort of beat up on the field a lot more than the others. But there's another point here, which is you expect a little bit more variability in 1-round events than 3, and also in 2-round events than 3. These 3 events on the left and the right are 3-round events. The Blessings was a 2-round event. So when you see this big point award of 173 points for the Blessings, you need to multiply it by 2/3 because it's only a 2-round event, and you should really be comparing 115 weighted points with 135 at Carmel, 102 at Medina, 112 at Windy City, and those you can see are all quite comparable. So the 4 winners of these tournaments receive similar weighted points, and that's what affects their ranking. So I realize when the headline is, why does the winner of the Blessings get 173 points? Well, it really only counts as 115, and these strong events, the winners get very similar points. So I
Thanks,
hope Ryan, that helps answer your question.
And there was a few follow-up questions, including one from Ryan about the individual winners, an example at the Annika and the Stevens Cup, about them getting hurt because of a tie for a win. All 4 players who won at the Annika had an amazing event in a great field. whereas the winner of the Blessings, had a great event in a decent field, which he won by 3. So how are the points so different there, Mark?
Great. Okay. Again, thanks, Ryan, for the question. This is the same kind of chart, but for individuals, there's many more dots. So you can think of this as the leaderboard of the Remax Prime Properties Bearcat Invitational. Here's the leaderboard of the Nittany Lion event. The 2 events that are in Ryan's question are the 2 at the right, the Blessings and the Annika. But again, I want to put this into a larger context. These are 2 strong events, but this is a 25th percentile strength event, a median strength event, a 75th percentile strength event. So you can see, as you have stronger events, more points are awarded to the winner, more points are awarded to the middle of the pack, more points are awarded to the bottom of the pack. That's how the strength of field is incorporated in a fair way. And then you get to the right. These are 2 very strong events, and it doesn't quite follow the pattern. So why is that pattern not quite followed? Well, for a couple of reasons. So you can see that the winner of the Blessings got a lot of points compared to the winner of the Annika. And in fact, the Annika had 4 winners tied, and those dots overlap, so you can't quite see. But this top dot on the Annika is really 4 players who tied for first. So there's, I would say, 3 reasons for this point differential. The first is, at the Blessings, there was a big margin of victory. You take a look at that margin of victory, it's bigger than this margin, that margin, that margin. It's huge. So a main reason for the Blessings getting so many points is a big margin of victory. A second is, all of these other events are 3-round events except for the Blessings, which is 2. So that 137 points that the Blessings received, you've got to think of this as multiplied by 2/3, because it's only 2/3. So it's really 91 weighted points. And that's what you should be comparing to the Annika. Then the other is, so one is the stroke differential, the second is the weighting by 2/3, and the third has to do with the separation at the Annika. If you take a look at the winner versus the middle of the pack, there's a big difference between the winner of the Remax Prime and the middle of the pack. There's a big difference between in the Nittany Lion. There's a big spread in this. There's a big spread in this. If you take a look at the Annika, there's a small spread from the beginning, the top player, to the bottom, a very small spread. In a normal tournament with 4 players tied, you would expect these 4 winners to be way up here, getting a lot more points. And it's because these players were so tightly bunched. Not that there was 4 winners, it's that they were tightly bunched, and none of these 4 winners separated themselves very much from the pack, which the middle of the pack would be about here. So the middle of the pack here compared to the winner, that's a big separation, and it gets a lot more points because of the stroke differential. So the last point is, the stroke differential is so compressed in the Annika. But if there were 4 winners up there, those 4 winners would all receive many more points. They're not splitting a certain amount of points among those 4 winners, and that's why they're getting less. It has nothing to do with that, because there's no fixed points. It has to do with the stroke differential. So those are the 3 reasons that the winner of the Annika doesn't get as many points as the winner of the Blessings.
Okay, Mark, there's a follow-up question from the previous one from Missy Farkay of Arizona State. One thing not factored is that Windy City had twice as many teams competing than the Carmel Cup. Why does the Carmel Cup not have half the points?
So here your performance is, your points are awarded based on your event strokes gained. And so it's just a different system. It is true that if you have a bigger field, it's harder to win. So if you were doing a fixed points for first place, it would make sense that first place would get more points in a bigger event. Here, your points are awarded based on how well you performed in that event. And so the number of teams sort of indirectly affects the points, in that the number of teams sort of affects the strength of field and how much you can separate from the field. So the number of teams sort of is a factor in that it affects the average strokes gained or the strength of the field, but it's not a total points for a stroke play that's split up. So I hope that helps answer that one.
Okay, just conscious of time, and we've got a few sections to get through. So a question from Stephen Bradley, University of South Florida, around the Husky Invitational. Washington won by 26 shots over one team in the top 25 in the country and was awarded 150 points, almost twice as many as Virginia, beating 6 teams ranked in the top 25. How does this work?
Okay, so thanks for that question. And I'm going to kind of follow the same thing because I think this kind of chart helps explain that. And many of the questions are about sort of unusual outcomes. The typical outcome, again, if you have a weak field, is that the winner gets fewer points than a median field, and the median field winner gets fewer points than the 75th percentile winner. And the question is basically about the Husky versus the Georgia, which are two strong events. But if you see this progression, the winners of stronger events tend to get more points. Here, the Georgia the Georgia Invitational, the winner gets fewer points than this slightly weaker event. And so the main reason for that is the stroke differential between first and second at the Husky is enormous. And so this could have been a very strong team from another division that played down, and you want to give them fair points for their sort of resounding victory. And that's kind of what happened here. And if you take a look at the Georgia, they get less points because, yeah, it was a good and kind of a normal event and a normal points. So the only thing really that's an outlier in this is the Husky winner. And that's because the stroke differential between first and second, or between the first and the middle of the pack, is enormous, and they were kind of fairly rewarded for that. The winner of the Georgia event did not separate themselves very much from the field.
Thanks, Mark. And then just a final question in this section before we go on to match play. This is from Stuart Burke at Kansas State. Also asked in a different way by John Hackney at Coker University. How is strength of schedule calculated? Does the system use previous seasons' data to calculate strength of field?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question. It was a mandate in designing this ranking system that no data from previous seasons would be used in this season's ranking calculations. So that's the first point. No data from the past season is being used. That also kind of ties your hands at the beginning of the season. You need several weeks going into the season in order to calculate a strength of field. So how is the strength of field calculated? Well, the way that I think about it is the strength of an event is the average strokes gained of teams in the event. And for those not so familiar with strokes gained, think of this as adjusted score. But what other people tend to look at, because it's even simpler, is the average rank of teams in the event. All of these give kind of similar results. So let me compare the average strokes gained of teams in two events with the average rank of teams. So a strong event would be the EV Odom Invitational Women's D1 with 15 teams. The average rank is 77 with a range from 13 to 109 and a strokes gained of -1.2. So this is a fairly strong women's D1 event. A weaker event would be the Clash at Boulder Creek, 19 teams. Their average rank is 150. So you just compare the 77 to 150, it seems like it's a weaker event. The range goes from 68 to 233. So the bottom end of the range is greater and the top end of the range is greater. So if you look at the range or you look at the average, you get the same result. Again, I kind of think of this in terms of strokes gained. The average strokes gained of these 19 teams at the Clash at Boulder Creek is -3.5. So more than 2 strokes different per round per player is a way that you could think of this as being a weaker event, and that's going to then impact how the points are awarded in ways that we saw here, that weaker events tend to award fewer points. So you could, again, I think of this as the average strokes gained, and that's how strength of field is calculated.
Thanks, Mark. We're going to move on to the match play section and invite our next coach on, Conrad Ray from Stanford, to ask a question about this.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to jump on, and fascinating stuff. Thanks, Mark, for your hard work in rolling out a system that is complex, but hope we're all trying to digest. I guess you touched on really the basis of my question when you answered Lisa's questions. I think talking amongst my peers, there's a lot of angst relative to how match play ranking factors into the stroke play, in the total ranking, both on the team front and the individual front. I also, this is maybe not a question for you as much as it is for John and the Clip team, is would it be easier just to take match play out of the ranking completely? I think, with the rollout in a new system, it also gives us pause to think about a rollout and what's actually included in the ranking. Maybe that hay's out of the barn already, but I think there is a strong undercurrent amongst the coaches that feel like if we can't get match play to make sense in the ranking, then why do we even have it at all? So I'll pause there and let you comment.
Great. So thanks, Conrad. We tried to build this system taking into account input from the NCAA and coaches. So there is a difference between match play and stroke play, and I do want to try and argue that match play is being fairly handled. So if you want to get rid of match play, it shouldn't be because it's impacting the rankings in a way other than what you would expect or other than what would be fair. So match play versus stroke play, just to summarize, stroke play, there are no fixed points. Points are awarded based on the strokes gained in an event. Stroke differential matters, and that was a strong coaching preference. This approach allows stronger weak fields to get fair points and easier hard courses to get fair points. And the stroke play points are weighted. One round gets a third of the weight of a 3-round event. Match play, there are fixed points. Points are split between two competitors, individuals or teams, based on just the win, loss, or tie outcome. The margin of victory does not matter. Again, this was a desire of the coaches, and I think makes sense. So points are allocated so that ranking moves are fair relative to stroke play. So if you take a look at a 1-round match play versus 1-round stroke play, on average, those ranking moves will be similar. 1-round match play is weighted by a third. So the team and individual rankings use the same procedures for stroke and match play. So that part is the same. So I think a lot of the question about match play has to do with not factoring in this 1/3 weight. It just seems that the points are unfair. But the reason you get these big point awards in match play is because it's a 1-round event, and they subsequently get multiplied by a third. So the ranking impact tends to be much, much smaller in a 1-round match than in a 3-round stroke play event. So related to this, your question, some of the confusion is, if two different teams beat the same team, why do they get different points? And this wasn't exactly your question, Conrad, but it certainly came up on social media. And let me try and explain why that happens, and I hope it becomes clear. So the ranking principle is, if a team wins their match, their average points must increase, or not decrease at a minimum. But think of, if you win, that's the best you can do. You better not move backwards in the rankings. You better stay the same or move forward. So that is the main principle of how match play is incorporated into the ranking. So let's see how this works. If you have team 1, which I mean the team ranked number 1 that has 100 average points that they bring to this match, against a much weaker team 200 that has 5 average points. Well, team 1 is so much better than team 200 that you expect team 1 to win. And because this expected outcome happens, you wouldn't expect the rankings to move very much. So team 1 must receive more than 100 points not to negatively affect their rankings. And let's say they're splitting 105, so maybe team 1 gets 101 points and team 200 maybe gets 4 points, as an example. So with this point allocation, team 1 is not going to be penalized. It will stay the same or move up in the rankings. This is the way you need to split these 105 points for that to happen. Team 1 needs to get at least 100 points. So I hope that makes sense and is consistent with this ranking principle. But now let's go to this other example with the team ranked 50 playing the exact same week, team 200.
Have you got those? Sorry, Mark. Have you got those slides on the screen? So I'm not sure if we're seeing your.
Are you serious? You don't see that? So I'll try resharing again. That's unfortunate.
Oh, there we go. That's better. Thank you.
Sorry, that was unfortunate. So I hope that sort of made sense, that a strong team beating a weak team needs to get at least the strong team's average points in order to stay the same or improve in the rankings. Here we have a team ranked 50 playing the same very weak team. The team ranked 50 brings 30 points to the match. The team ranked 200 also brings the same 5 points that they brought before. The team ranked 50 wins. How many points do they need to get to basically keep their ranking or move up? Well, they need to receive more than 50 points. So let's say they receive 51 points. That will keep them the same or move them up. Team 200 maybe gets 4 points, maybe a little bit different. That keeps them the same, possibly moves them down a tiny bit. So in this case, the strongest team won, and the strong team 50 beat the same team, and they get very different points in order that the ranking effect is sensible. So team 1 and team 50 receive vastly different points, beating the same team 200 in order for the ranking impact to be fair. So a lot of what I saw on social media is, how can this team get 100 points and this team only gets 50 for beating the same weak team? And that's the reason, because we want this ranking principle to hold, that if a team wins their match, their average points must stay the same or increase. But if you beat a very weak team, you don't expect to shoot up in the rankings. That would be nonsense. So you expect to receive basically a little bit more than your current average points. So I hope that clarifies a little bit about match play. And instead of thinking about the points, think about the ranking impact, because that's what really matters.
And just
Conrad, did you follow up?
Yeah. Could I just ask one quick follow-up? Just to clarify, is there any incentive for a higher ranked team to play match play? So let's say you have, okay.
Yeah.
That's a little unclear to me still. I'm just, I know that this example makes sense, but if you're a top 10 team, is there any incentive to try and schedule match play as an example?
Yeah, good question. So this is an extreme example to explain why these extreme point differentials are the only sensible thing to do. If you were team 1, why would you play team 200? I can't think of a good reason for that. So it doesn't make sense for a very strong team to play a very weak team unless it's, scheduled months in advance, and that's the way it turns out. What will happen is, if two teams that are similarly ranked play each other, then the ranking move of the match will be very similar in match play and in stroke play. So the biggest moves will be when you have similarly ranked teams playing each other, and then you will move up or down by amount in match play that's comparable to the amount that you move up or down in stroke play. So I would say that's the reason for match play. If you win against a comparably ranked team, there's more information that you're a little bit better than we thought. Your ranking should improve, and if you lose that match, you ought to go backwards. So the points are going to more affect the rankings if you're playing somebody similarly ranked. The other case would be if you're the weaker team and you have an upset victory against the strong team. Well, the weaker team is going to go up a lot. So, but you don't want to go too far.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. The last thing I'll say is, just as a statement, I think to your point, it is scheduled 18 months oftentimes in advance. And if you think about conference match play tournaments, you have, you know, a vast differential in terms of ranking when you get there. And so I think that's a key point to make. Again, I double down on my question and challenge the committee and John Baldwin and everyone out there to consider what we put in this ranking, because I think it's very clean and makes sense from a stroke play perspective. There's just a lot of unpredictables in match play. So thank you for the time.
So Conrad, can I just follow up with that, which is one other point which is related to what you just said. And that is, if you're in a stroke play event with 15 teams and you perform well, you will get rewarded for that. If you're in a match against one other, even similarly ranked team, and you play well, you could get punished because the other team played better and beat you. So you can understand an above average performance in a stroke play event with 15 teams, and you will get rewarded because not all of those 15 teams are going to play, you know, out of their mind. Whereas in match play, we know you could play well and the other team can play better, and you just lost. So you get a negative hit on your ranking, even though you played well, because relative to the other team, you didn't play as well as they did. So I think it's fair, but there's more variability. And that's true basically of just stroke play versus match play. You can see that in other tournaments where if you have a 64-team single elimination event, you know, you could, if on your bad day, the other team has a worse day, you get through to the next round. And that's the way it works. Whereas in a stroke play event against 15 teams and you play badly, it's going to affect your score and your finish.
Yeah, thank you. I would just say too, the problem though in that discussion is that you basically are normalizing, right? So your first team All-American who shoots 65 on average isn't that same point earner in the match play conversation. And so I know that it totally makes sense what you're explaining. The teams move relative to their performance and their expected performance. But I think that there is, to your point, there's a ton of variability in the match play component, because the fact that we can't control who we play theoretically, especially in prime times of the season, because it's scheduled so far out. So it's more of a policy thing. It's not so much of a ranking question thing. So I just wanted to bring that forward, and I've taken enough time. So thank you.
Thanks, Coach. And just a point of clarification there that Clipped, you know, we are the publisher of the rankings, the platform that publishes them, and a lot of those questions will be sort of addressed by the NCAA. Mark, I realize we need to probably move on because we've spent quite a lot of time on match play. I think it would be a good idea for us to move up to playing down a division. Although there is a question on the in the questions about hold on one second, let me just find it. At some point, does the margin, you know, we're talking about the margin of victory in match play not mattering, and this is from Bill Alcorn at TCU. If not, why does it not matter?
So it does not matter because that's what the coaches wanted. And the reason that I was given is if you've got 5 players in a match and 3 of the players have won, 2 of the other players may be taken off the course, and you win the match to play, say, an afternoon match. There's no reason in that case to continue. So if you've got players that are conceding a match because the team has already won, it sort of doesn't make sense to then say, well, that was a close, 3-2 win versus a 5-0 win. And so that's kind of the reason for not including the margin of victory in match play.
Right, thanks, Mark. So let's move on to, in the interest of time, we're at the hour mark, and we do want to be able to ask some open questions because they are coming in. Playing up or playing down a division. Again, Alyssa Waite at California State. How is a Division II team receiving more points for coming in last place than a Division I team winning a D1 event?
So can you see the screen?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Mark.
Okay. So thanks for the question, Alyssa. And I think this is mainly a question about points conversion. And that is, there's a D1 point schedule and a D2 point schedule, and there is a conversion between them. So I looked through the data to try and find an example. Here's a D2 event where last place got 2.8 D2 points, a D1 event where the winner got 1.4 D1 points. Obviously, this was a very weak event, and the other was very strong. But what happens is when you convert the D1 points to D2 or the D2 points to D1, you will see that the last place D2 points becomes 0.7 D1 points. And that when you compare on a D1 point basis, the last place of D2 actually gets fewer points than the winner of the D1 event. So there is a conversion, which is, if it's a D1 event, you'll see D1 points on the page. If it's a D2 event, you'll see D2 points. But if you're playing out of your division on your team's page, if you're a D2 team, you'll only see D2 points. So there will be a little bit of a change or a conversion when you play in a D1 event and you look on your team's page and you see more D2 points because of this conversion.
I think that probably speaks to something that John said in his intro about we're looking at ways of how we display points to make all this more understandable for everybody, and to the transparency point. There's a question here from Coach Ben Feld of Drexel University. How would a Division 1 team be impacted by participating in an all Division 2 event? Is there any outcome that is positive or that won't hurt that team's ranking?
So it is, it's the case that you should get a fair number of points for your performance, whether it's in a D1 or a D2 event. So as an example, I went to women's D2 team ranking and I looked at the number 1 team, Nova Southeastern, with the number 2 team, Rollins College, who is a close number 2. It turns out that even though these are both D2 teams, Nova Southeastern played all D2 events. Rollins College played all D1 events. So teams can play in or out of their division and be ranked similarly. So the same performance will earn the same points whether you're in a D1 or a D2 event. So I don't think you have to worry about that. And this is also a case where if we did not include out-of-division competition, we couldn't have ranked Rollins College because they played all of their fall events out of their division. And in this case, you can see these two teams ranked very similarly, even though they played in different divisions.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Now we're going to move on to sort of other questions. Carly Ludwig from Baylor. Many coaches seem to think that the best thing to do is to set up their tournament courses in the easiest manner possible in order to shoot the lowest possible scores. Can you provide clarification whether course setup or difficulty does or does not matter?
So the short answer is the course setup does not matter. Course setup does not matter. And here's an example of an easy course and a tough course. So this is a NCAA men's D1 team example, a tough course at the Williams Cup where the winning score was 853. An easy course at the SEC Strokeplay hosted by Jerry Pate, the winning score was 811. Here, the number 1 ranked team won. Here, the number 2 ranked teams. These were almost equally strong events. And the winners of these 2 events received almost identical points. And so even though this was an easy course with a low winning score, and this was a tough course with a high winning score, they received basically the same winner points because the method adjusts for the course difficulty. Again, you can think of strokes gained as scores that are adjusted by the course difficulty. The winner of this event had a strokes gained of about 4. The winner of this event had a strokes gained of about 4. So you can think of that as, you know, how much they separated themselves from the pack. So winning on a tough course and an easy course received almost identical points. And so you should not think that there's an advantage or disadvantage to setting up your course for a low or high scoring.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. The next 2 questions we had, we've answered, including one of the live questions we had lined up. So I'm going to move on a bit in the interests of getting to a sort of open Q&A, which I know that the coaches want to take advantage of. Andy Graber from Rock Valley College. Will there be rankings for NJCAA Division III?
Thanks, Andy, for that. The short answer is it's up to you. Whatever the NJCAA wants, we will do. So we can do separate rankings, or we can combine D2 and D3. we will follow your recommendation on that.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Jim McGrew from Dalton State College in the NAIA. Are we going to eliminate dual matches counting for the rankings?
Thank you for that. And Jim, the answer to that is no. And the rationale is multiple. One is dual matches are an approved form of competition, so they should be included. If I'm wrong about that, I hope you will tell me. I think teams deserve ranking credit for their performances, whether it's in a dual match or not. And I think the ranking system handles dual matches fairly. Again, the ranking impact of a one-round dual match is 1/3 the weight of a 3-round event. And when you take that 1/3 factor into account, the ranking moves are exactly what you would expect. So the short answer is dual matches will be are and will be included.
Great. And we have a question here from Ryan Blagg of the University of Louisville. Mark, can you discuss how a player can play the first round of a tournament and WD after round 1 and still receive more points than a player that played all 54 holes and finished second in the tournament? The example he's talking about is Caleb Surratt at Tennessee's Visit Knoxville Collegiate Tournament.
Thanks for that question, Ryan. This is one thing that will be in the rankings, but it's not currently in the rankings. The plan all along was the following, so in the next published ranking, withdrawal, DQ, DNF will be handled this way. A player will receive 0 points for the round, and that round will have a 1/3 weight, just like every other round. So the round will count in the computation of the player's average points. And so the player's average points will always decrease after any withdrawal. Currently, withdrawals are just ignored. So they're not basically in the data, but they will be, and this is how they will be handled. The reason for this is this ensures that there's never an incentive to withdraw. So if a player is playing bad after 17 holes and they say, oh no, it's going to hurt my ranking, well, withdrawing will hurt the ranking more. A player will always be better off finishing than withdrawing. So I think this is the right way to handle it. But if you look at the current published rankings, withdrawal information is just not there at the moment. So the biggest change that you'll see when the rankings are republished, there's not too many of these withdrawals, but this is where you'll see a change, that you will not get more points for sure, as your question implies. That will not happen. So thanks for that, and that will certainly be taken into account and fixed.
Mark, apologies, I don't seem to have the coach name for this one. My note-taking is broken down. Are there any improvements, tweaks, or improvements you see as necessary with the ranking system as it is? Is it working as you intended?
So I think the answer is yes. I think the improvements are more in terms of communication. We need and are trying to do a better job of communicating how the rankings work. We thought we were being transparent by showing points, but points raised more questions than they answered. So we're working on a few, possible changes to the website to better explain how the system works. And again, a big example of this would be match play, where somebody receives 150 points and people think, kind of freak out and say, that's just not fair. But the ranking impact of that, well, you won a match and you move up 1 spot. Well, that seems about right. And that's what's happening. So the ranking impacts are sort of exactly what's expected. If you take a look at the rankings of teams and players, I'm very confident that if you took a look at an alternative system, the ranks would be very close, especially at the top. And I think elsewhere in the rankings, these would be more accurate than another system. But I have 100% confidence that if you take a look at the top 10, top 20, top 25 versus an alternative ranking system, you would see how similar they are. Whereas these, it's transparent, you can see the points, and there's justification. Why is a team ranked where they are?
Well, this is a question from Alex Ochoa, and this might be one that we can discuss in conference, at convention rather. Is there a way for coaches to have access to the expected outcome charts Mark displayed earlier, but specific to their events?
So the plan is to publish projected rankings, and I think expected outcome charts of some sort would be great. And I would love to work with Clip to see what we can come up with there. I do intend, for some people that have asked questions about why is our team ranked there, to give individual responses with charts like that to those via, say, email. But yeah, we're looking into better delivery mechanisms. Partly Marcus may help us out there as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. I think, according to Marcus, who is sort of adjudicating the questions behind the scenes, we have covered a lot of the ground and a lot of the questions that have been asked in the chat. Just want to check whether there's any more coming through, but if not, you know, we'd like to. Hold on, we've got one here from Zach Hale. Sorry, I'm just waiting for it to come through. Sorry, just waiting for this one. Just one more question for you, Mark.
Yep.
I think there's a question about whether we could actually do a separate call for each division, and that's something we've definitely, I think, from our point of view, we've taken the feedback, and there has been an awful lot of feedback that we've looked at and studied very carefully, and we're in conversations with a lot of people. So I think that sort of divisional call where we might be able to address some of the specific questions that people might have would be very useful. That's likely to be something that would take place, I imagine, after the convention in Vegas. But I think that's it. So I'm going to invite Piers, Parnell, and John Baldwin just to close the meeting. And from my perspective, Mark, thank you very much for answering all those questions.
And thanks everybody for attending. Your questions are great. A lot of them hit on some of the more counterintuitive aspects of the ranking, and I'm hoping that through this process you'll become more comfortable that it's having the desired effect. And we take this very, very seriously, because we know how important it is to you to have accurate rankings, and it's a great opportunity. And please feel free to continue with the questions, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Piers, would you like to say a few words? Or actually, maybe I'll ask John first, and then maybe Piers can close. Thanks, Mark.
Sure. Thanks, Dan, and appreciate the opportunity to say a few things here at the end. Thanks everybody for the questions today, to Marcus and Dan for helping to moderate and get through many of them. I think the format was of this week's call versus last week was certainly productive. So appreciate all the input from the coaches. I know there were a couple, Coach Ray in particular, who mentioned a couple of things that our committees need to be considering and be aware of, and I saw some of that in the chat as well. So we'll certainly be taking those things to our golf committees for further discussion and consideration, and look forward to seeing many of you here next week at the coaches convention, and continuing the conversations in the weeks and months ahead. So with that, I'll say thanks, and then I'll turn it to Piers.
Thank you, John, and thank you, everyone. I think, as luck would have it, my internet appears to be somewhat dodgy, so I will keep these remarks very, very brief, and just say a big thank you to Mark for all the work he's done today in collaboration with Dan and Marcus and the rest of the team here at Clipped. We're obviously incredibly keen to make sure that we got to as many of your questions as is possible. Hopefully this has been a success, and certainly from a Clip perspective, want to reiterate that we are here trying to do everything we can to support the entire college community from end to end. So as it relates in particular to that last question, we will be setting up a series of workshops, for want of a better word, and smaller group sessions at the convention, and then in the period thereafter as we continue to build out the platform and the experience for you all. So please do keep an eye out from respective national offices and from the GCAA and WGCAA, who will be working with to coordinate those efforts. I know that Marcus will be central towards that and making sure that we cover as much ground as possible, because we certainly don't want anyone to feel in any way, shape, or form left out as we look to transform, you know, this entire landscape for college golf, and hopefully help to elevate it. So thank you everyone for all your time. Thank you, Mark again, and John for being available. And with that, I will look forward to seeing hopefully as many of you as I can next week in Las Vegas. Thank you all.